I'm going to be sitting down with Tommy Robinson this week. To say Tommy's a controversial figure would be putting it mildly. You only have to glance at his Twitter mentions to see how some see him as a modern-day hero defending Western society, while others see him as a racist thug. Thankfully, I don't get all my information from Twitter, and neither should you. Tommy is the co-founder of the English Defence League, a movement that opposes Islamism and Sharia law in the UK. He left the EDL a few years ago after connecting with Maajid Nawaz's Quilliam Foundation because he felt the EDL had become too extreme. Now, Tommy is part of Pegida UK, a subset of the bigger European Pegida movement, which has the stated goal of preventing the Islamification of our countries. Basically, Tommy thinks that the UK and now all of Europe are en route to becoming Islamic nations. Tommy reached out to me about 2 months ago to see about being a guest on the show. Before I said yes, I actually had to do a bit of soul searching. As you guys know, I'm beyond fed up with the regressive left's labeling of everyone a bigot or a racist, but in Tommy's case, are they actually right? And if the regressives are, why should I even talk to someone with racist views? There's no doubt Tommy spends most of his time talking about the dangers of Islam. He certainly isn't hiding that. But are his motives actually based in bigotry? It wasn't just those questions that had me unsure whether to talk to him, though. There was actually something else at work, and something that really exposes the rot that the regressives are causing in our society. Part of me was actually afraid that if I spoke to Tommy, regardless of whether he really is a bigot or not, that I also would be labeled a bigot. Let me repeat that. I feared that just by having a conversation with someone, just by hearing their views on this show as I do every week, that I would then get one of those awful labels that people throw around, thrown on me. After a couple days of thinking about it, I realized that not only did I have to do the interview with Tommy, but my fear was the exact reason that I had to do it. The chilling effect that words like bigot and racist have are not just on the person at who they are aimed, but they're also used to stop other people from talking to them. The less we talk, the more the authoritarians can move in with easy answers. Once I really wrapped myself around that, it was a no-brainer. Like all my guests, I'll let Tommy's ideas be heard, and you, the audience, will be the judge. Ironically, if the left had been more honest about the dangers of Islamism all along, I would feel less of a need to have conversations like this, but they refused to, so here we are. If his ideas are good, then let them spread. If they aren't, then let them be beat by better ideas. As my former guest Douglas Murray said on Sam Harris's podcast a few weeks ago, it's too late to be willing to be blackmailed by people who are fundamentally insincere in their insults. That's exactly how I feel about labels, or pretty much any of the other nonsense coming from people who would rather stifle debate than have it. This past weekend, I rewatched one of my all-time favorite movies, V for Vendetta. In V's powerful speech to London, he says, "And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look in the mirror." I think it's getting high time that we all look in the mirror and decide what we believe. My guest this week is an author, activist, and former leader of the English Defence League. He's also no stranger to controversy. Tommy Robinson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, man. So I want to start with this, which is what I led the show off with, which is that I struggled with the decision to even have you on the show because I see what people say about you. And half of it is this guy is going to save the Western world. And then half of it is he's a bigot, he's a racist, and plenty of other stuff in line with that. So first off, do you get that often? Do you get that people are sometimes afraid to talk to you?
Yes, and there's a reason for that. You will be targeted, as has anyone else that speaks to me.
Oh, great.
By a campaign. You will. And trust me, you will. I've just been asked. Last night it was released that I'm going to be addressing the Hindu leadership of the UK. I've been invited to an event to discuss multiculturalism. They've been targeted. They're getting attacked now. I expect that when I turn up, if they're not forced or pressurised into cancelling, which is what's happened with university after university after university, with schools, anyone that asks me to speak, even TV shows in the UK, there's a conservative effort to silence what I'm saying and to attack anyone that gives me a platform to say it.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned at the top, that was really what my deciding factor was to talk to you, because I'm so sick of everyone being labeled bigot and racist and all that, that if I'm afraid to talk to you, then that is almost a bigger problem than bigotry and racism. So that's why we have to do this, I think.
Yeah, you're in a minority there, Dave, so thank you. You are.
All right, well...
Most people put their reputations or their careers or things like that before free speech in the UK.
Yeah, well, somehow I still have this belief that if I talk about free speech, that it'll actually be good for my career. We shall see. But why don't we start with this? Let's just start with the most obvious piece of meat. Are you bigoted against Muslims? Go.
No, I'm not. I try to separate Muslims whenever I speak. I try to separate Muslims from Islam. I have an opinion on Islam in the same way Islam has an opinion on me. Islam is bigoted towards non-Muslims. Not every Muslim, of course. Every Muslim is not bigoted. If you've read my book, that some of the best people I've met in my life growing up are Muslims. I don't have a problem with Muslims, but I do have a problem with the way Islam is influencing my country. I have a problem with the hatred that is incited from it, and I'm fearful of what the future holds.
Right. So just to be clear, and this is what I've spent a lot of the time on the show talking about, you're making a distinction between Islam, meaning the doctrine, the set of ideas that are in books, between that and between the people that may or may not be using these ideas. And as you said, you've met plenty of Muslim people that you like a lot, and you're making that distinction.
I make that distinction in a similar way to the fact that, look, if I was a critic of Scientology, I would not be getting called a racist. I would not be getting called any of the things that I am. Just because it happens that a majority of Muslims are not white, I'm beaten down and attacked with this racist stick, which is ridiculous, because Islam is an idea. It's an idea that should be criticised, and it's my God-given right to criticise it.
Yeah,
and I don't incite hate against individual Muslims. I've never, ever... I led the English Defence League for over 6 years. I've never been done for any racism, any extremism, any insightful speeches. In fact, if people... At the height of leading the English Defence League, when our soldier Lee Rigby was beheaded in the streets of London, at our very next demonstration, I started my speech off by saying that there are 600 Muslims who serve in the British Armed Forces, that if you attack a Muslim woman or you spit at a Muslim woman, you're an absolute coward. And I tried to get the distinction between some things are morally just, and I think my campaign is morally just and righteous, and other things are cowardly. Attacking houses of worship, whether they be Christian or Muslim, is cowardly. So I've done that from day one. In fact, as far as the organisation goes, we've been a moderate voice in this, but we can be completely attacked as extremists or hateful and inciting hate. Literally just this week, we're having a demonstration in the city of Birmingham, which is Britain's second biggest city. It has a large Muslim population. It has a lot of problems there. And I met a Muslim councillor, and this is where the problem comes in. And I said to him, if an organisation is completely peaceful and there's no violence, there's no alcohol, do they have a right to come to this city and criticise Islam? And he said no. And that's where we're at. And I said, why not? He said, because criticising Islam incites hate. I said, telling the truth can't incite hate. And that's where we're being beaten down so much, because so many, and he's a councillor for the Labour Party, which is a mainstream political party.
Sure.
So many of these people are against free speech when it comes to Islam.
Yeah, well, as my audience knows, I mean, this is really where the left has failed. And from everything that I'm hearing from my friends in the UK and across most of Europe, sadly, most of Western Europe, the left is failing everywhere. And the more that the voices of liberals are silenced, the more that the far right is going to be strengthened. You're probably somewhat of an example of that. So before we get into all the specifics and everything that's going on today, can you just tell me a little bit of your history, growing up, when you became politically active, that kind of stuff?
So I grew up in a town called Luton. It's one of the most multicultural towns in Europe. When I was born in 1982, there was one mosque. Now there's in excess of 30. we have approximately 50,000 Muslims. We've had just last week 4 Muslims from my hometown, one which went to my school, have been charged with terrorism. Another Muslim who is a white convert, just again this week, has been charged with inciting support for ISIS. My hometown was the launch pad for the 7/7 attack on London's Underground, the fertiliser bomb plot, the Stockholm bomber. Some of you may remember the Stockholm bomber. Mm-hmm. He was radicalised in my hometown. He lived doors away from my auntie.
Wow.
So Al Mujahideen, Omar Bakri, Abu Hamza with the hook, their head office and their organisation's base was in my town. So
what's going on in that town?
What's going on in that town is it has been the epicentre and the home of radical Islam. And they've been allowed, unchallenged by councils or government or police, for 30 years to plan, orchestrate and radicalise an entire community. And we feel, in my hometown, after September the 11th in America, when I come out to my shops the next week, we had Magnificent 19 posters everywhere. We had posters glorifying the 19 suicide bombers. That in the local college, they celebrated. Every year after that, outside in our town centre, there was a celebration parade for the Muslims who murdered on September the 11th. That's where I live. So I've grown up from a very young age, and I have many of these what we call liberals in the UK. They're not really liberals, but or those on the left who condemn me. They shout at me. They know nothing about the life I've lived. Nothing at all to the life I've lived. They have not seen what we've seen. They don't live with the effects. And when we talk about multiculturalism in the UK, like we have our political leaders. David Cameron has come out and said multiculturalism has failed. Angela Merkel said years ago multiculturalism has failed. What they're actually saying is Islam's failed. Because in my hometown and my group of friends, the majority of them come from immigrant background, whether it be St. Lucian, Italian, Bulgarian, Jamaican, Indian, and everyone gets on fine. And my town has been divided not through racial lines ever. We don't have the racial problem that I don't know if I believe you may have in the US, but we don't have a racial problem like that. Mm-hmm. We have a religious tensions and a religious line drawn through the communities.
Right. So when you saw all this growing up, you're not that old, right? You're in your mid-30s. When did your sort of awakening appear? When did you say, okay, this is something that I have to talk about and attach myself to?
So my awakening was the Beslan School massacre, 2004, I believe. What it was that I'd watched this group, Al Mujahideen, I'd watched them grow. And when I say watch them, one of the man who was convicted this week, who was an ex-member of their organisation, a white ginger convert called Ibrahim Handerson. His name's Roger, really. But I'd watched him convert. I'd watched him become radical. I'd seen some of my own friends who had converted in prison and changed. Yeah. So I'd seen it all. I'd seen this group. And then I watched an interview after the Beslan massacre where this group was saying in my hometown that if it happened to an English school, it would be justified. And I also knew that group were openly converting and recruiting in my town centre, where my family go, where we all go. They were openly recruiting on the streets every single Saturday to send people to fight for the Taliban against our armed forces. That was it for me. That was 2004. I organised my first demonstration. I was aged 21 years old, and I organised a demonstration called Ban the Luton Taliban.
So it's hard to believe that. So they're actually recruiting in a town in England for the Taliban. We know that a lot of ISIS fighters are coming from England. They're coming from all of Western Europe, basically going through Turkey right into Syria. What does law enforcement do about that? It sounds like not much, right?
They do nothing. So what I did, when I organised this demonstration, I actually made leaflets over 10 years ago now. And in those leaflets, well, we're going back 12 years. So this was before people had heard of homegrown terrorism in the UK, before people have heard of these organisations. And in the leaflets, I made a point that our daughters and our sisters are being groomed, which we now know as an epidemic called grooming, which is where groups of Muslim men would get young girls and they gang rape them, yeah? And it's become an epidemic across the UK.
Yeah.
But it's been going on for 30 years. No one's ever spoke about it. Now, 12 years ago, I made a leaflet which went on the front page of my local newspaper saying whites and blacks are being religiously targeted. our women are being pimped and sexually abused and prostituted by Muslim gangs. I named the Muslim gangs. I named the extremist organisations. And I stood in the town centre and read this leaflet out, where I said that we demand that the police act. We demand that the councils act. There was no action after that. In fact, all that happened was I was targeted. I was targeted by Muslim gangs.
Yeah. Can some of the blame here be blamed on something related to British society that maybe we don't have here in America? America, for all our faults, and we have plenty of racial problems and all kinds of stuff, we've done the melting pot pretty well. Everyone has come here, no matter where they're from, and pretty much mixed in, bringing their traditions, and then becoming American. It sounds like, and from the emails I'm getting from Denmark and Sweden and all this, that something has happened in Europe, but I guess specifically in the UK, where for whatever reason, the Muslim population just hasn't integrated the way that other immigrant populations have. But could some of that be on the fault of the UK and not just the Muslim population?
Yes, it can, yes. It can be on the fault of multiculturalists who encouraged all these people to come here, told them that their culture was equal to ours, told them that they can go back into their own communities, they can live as they did in Afghanistan, in Iraq and Pakistan. And as soon as anyone like ourselves tried to scratch beneath the surface to say, well, let's see where we differ culturally, let's see where our opinions differ, then we've been screamed down as racist. And the reality is we need to understand, and you say it's worked relatively well in America. You have nowhere near the percent of Muslims in comparison to Europe, and it will not work well in America. And that's the warning you need to realise, is that you need to learn from what's happening over here, because you're going to face the same problems. If you have uneducated Somalians coming in uncontrollable numbers, you will face exactly the same problems I've grown up with in Luton.
Yeah.
If you allow Saudi Arabia, you allow Qatar, you allow Iran, you allow them footholds in your country with Salafist or Wahhabist mosques, you allow them to build schools and teach these children hatred, you will, in the next generation, be experiencing the hate that I experienced growing up.
So what do you think a town like yours, where this has been growing for a long time, as you're saying, what should be done at this point? I mean, these people are citizens of the UK, so what should be done to fight these ideas? Not the people, but to fight these ideas that are spreading.
What shouldn't be done is my local council spent £188,000 of taxpayers' money given to the Salafist mosque. That's a mosque that causes us huge problems. That's a mosque that when Ofsted went into it, they found books in the children's school library for how to cut off hands and feet. We shouldn't be funding them. We also should not be allowing Saudi Arabia or Qatar to fund these madrasas that are popping up left, right and centre. Mm-hmm. We should be tough on so many issues. It's knowing where to start, really. And I think towns that haven't had the problems that Luton have had should be looking to our town, looking at the infiltration. What we've seen is the way the Muslims control themselves and the way they vote, then our local council no longer care about us. They don't care because we don't keep them in power. The Labour Party are kept in power every year in Luton by 30 to 50,000 Muslim votes. So we become irrelevant, and that's vote bank politics. And we don't vote based on someone's ethnicity, or we don't vote on based on someone's religion, but the Muslim community do. That's all they vote on.
Yeah, so, even as I'm talking to you, I have this feeling, because I'm a liberal, I have this feeling of, is he exaggerating this? Like, is this an act, how big is this problem? I follow you on Twitter, you tweet videos all day long of, women being attacked, either in the UK or in Germany, wherever. And sometimes I have trouble sort of figuring out how much of this is actually happening all over the place, how big of the problem is, versus is it just this micro problem? And I guess your answer would be, well, it's a micro problem in my town, but it's spreading into this big macro thing.
The problem is bigger than anyone can comprehend. And that's why the political leaders, that's why police forces, that's why it's now a fact in the UK that police, social workers, councils conspired to hide these facts for decades.
Yeah, can you go into that a little bit? Because there's been a couple controversies about that. Yeah,
so there's been a Rubin Report, and before this Rubin Report, people used to say I was lying or inciting hate, and I just used to say it because it happened to my cousin, these similar sort of crimes, and we knew what the police reaction was then. So there was a Rubin Report, an in-depth report into one little small town in the north of England. In that small town, there's a population of male Muslims that are aged between 18 to 40. There's about 3,000. Now, in that town, they identified 1,400 young English girls who had been beaten, prostituted and raped in unbelievable numbers. Some of the girls were raped 30 times in one night. And when they've done this big report, what they've found in the report, actually, was that the council knew full well, the head of the police knew, the Muslim community knew, everyone knew this was happening. But the reason why they'd done nothing was through the fear of being branded as racists. That's how powerful political correctness is. Now, two of the circumstances in this report were that when the police turned up and there was a young girl who was 11 years old and she's being raped in a derelict house by 5 Muslim men. Now, when the police turned up, they arrested the girl for being drunk and disorderly. You've got to read the report. You've got to read the report. And also, there's another circumstance where the girl, two of the girls who were taken, and these girls go missing for days, at 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, they go missing for days. Yeah? Two of the girls were taken, so the dads went to get the girls back. The girls were inside the house. The dads have gone to the Muslims' house to get them back. When the police turned up, the police arrested the English girls' dads. They left the girls. And so these sort of things, which to any of your viewers, they sound unbelievable.
Right.
They sound unbelievable.
Yeah.
They're factual. They're in a government report. This is going on across our whole entire country. This isn't just going on in our country. It's going on in Holland. It's going on across Europe. Look at what's happening in Sweden. And this comes from a mindset and a culture and an ideology that teaches them that Muslim not just, well, women are inferior, but not non-Muslim women like ours, they're dirt. That's how, not all Muslims, because some Muslims that I've grown up with would be as disgusted as we are. Yeah. But there is a problem. If you look at the statistics for these, not paedophilia, because the majority of paedophiles in the UK are white, which you'd expect from a 90% white country. This is a new epidemic that men share young children with their brothers, their cousins, their work colleagues. The viewing of it within the community or within the group is not viewed in a similar way to how we would. If a member of our community said, I've got this young 12-year-old girl, that you'd fill them in. Right. But this is something very, very different, and it's new to the country. And what we're seeing now, we've seen it with Cologne again on New Year's Eve. It's now been put in people's faces more than ever. And I feel I've got 2 young daughters. We have to. I was just speaking before about a professor who Angela Merkel's given a speech this week in a university, and the professor has stood up and he's heckled her, and he said, "I'm scared. I have children. What future are you bringing to our children? This is an experiment you know nothing about." Yeah. And that's the reality of it. And it's not an experiment we know nothing about. We know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen from case studies. Luton town is a blueprint for the rest of the UK. It's a blueprint for the rest of Europe. It's a blueprint for America. What's happening here is happening everywhere. Yeah,
I mean, it's incredibly chilling listening to you. And again, that's why I wanted to talk to you and try to get a sense of the size of this whole thing. I saw a video this week. Did you see this? A 16-year-old girl posted a video from Germany talking about how she went to her local supermarket and she saw these guys staring at her, and they were migrants. And she really was afraid for her life. She posted a 20-minute video on Facebook, which she clearly delineated. She said, "I have nothing against Muslim people." She said, "I have friends that are Muslim," all of that stuff. She said, these people, these specific people that are coming now, there's something different. And from what I understand, the video was taken down and she was at least temporarily suspended from Facebook. So that really shows you how perverse the political correctness has got, if now Facebook is in on it too.
Oh, Facebook's completely on it. Yeah, everyone keeps getting suspended for posting videos or pictures of the reality and the truth. That young girl, that angers me so much, more than I can even express. When I watched that, and I could well up in my eyes sitting thinking, she's not free to walk to her shops in Germany in 2016. Why is she not free? Because hordes of Muslim men are coming in from a completely different culture, a completely different view on women, a completely different. We have to understand their mindset. And what gets me is that, look, I'm all for helping refugees, These are not refugees. 60% this week, the EU Commissioner has come out and said that they're economic migrants, 60%. Angela Merkel has opened those borders to 1.5 million last year. There is going to be a flood in the next coming years of tens of millions of Muslims come into Europe, come into our continent, where that girl and her feeling is just going to be natural to everybody. Everybody's going to be feeling that, and we shouldn't feel fearful in our own homes and towns, and we do.
Right.
And we do. And all I ever hear about is Islamophobia. All we ever hear about is that Muslim women are scared. I'm not being funny, but no one's raped Muslim women. No one is gang raping Muslim women. No young Muslim girls were attacked on New Year's Eve. No Muslim has had their head cut off in the street. No, this is not happening to Muslims. And that's where, when we look at the targeting, I had a meeting this week with a leading of a Sikh organisation. You should talk to him. He can give you a real in-depth of what's going on from a Sikh perspective.
Okay. He
deals with hundreds and hundreds of young children who have been taken from their families by Muslim gangs. And in the most recent one, when I went with a radio presenter, and the radio presenter said, well, it's got nothing to do with religion. And he said, well, actually, everything they're saying to the girls whilst raping them is about religion.
Yeah.
It's either about religion or race. I can go through the court cases where there was a Somalian rape gang down in Bristol in the UK, and he actually said it was his religious duty to do this. It's his and these are not what we're saying, it's what they're saying. They're saying, you white trash, you white filth, we'll gut you like a pig. All of these comments are being made to these young English girls, and all everyone wants to get around the fact is, oh, everyone's raping, everyone does it. No, not 90% of the convictions for street gang grooming are Muslim men out of a population of 4%.
Well, I really am starting to see this as almost a disease of the mind of people on the left, because even if everything you were saying was being magnified by 20%, 50%, let's say you're totally doubling the severity of all of this, it's still a problem. And every time I hear my friends on the left talk about it, they'll immediately say, well, Christianity, there were the Crusades, or the Catholic Church has covered up molesting children for hundreds of years, all these things. No one's denying those things, right? And some of those things are still happening right now.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that what you're talking about isn't a problem. So my question to you is, when in the UK did the left go off the deep end?
You see, what I keep trying to say, and I've tried to say for 6 years now, this is not a left-wing or right-wing issue, because people automatically pigeonhole myself as right-wing, or no, actually, that's a lie. I'm pigeonholed as far right.
Right.
Automatically. Whereas the majority of people who have supported my organisation over the years, many of them would have been left-wing Labour voters. So,
to be clear, the reason they'd be left-wing is because they're for women's rights, right? And they're probably for gay rights, and they're generally for minorities, so they should fit on the left.
Yeah,
but because they're
pushed to the right.
Yeah.
They're being pushed and forced to the right.
Yeah.
And that's because the left in the UK politically rely and have basically the Labour Party in the UK, their loyal vote bank used to be working class people like myself. Yeah. In England, we have a very classist system. I don't think you experience the same in America, but we have a very classist system. We have the bottom and the top, and you have what is fundamentally usually conservative people who are very wealthy, and working class people who are usually quite poor, or not quite poor, but poor and proud anyway. But what we then see is that as working class people started doing better, they would then aspire to be conservatives because they'd get more money. Yeah?
Right.
So then it seems that the Labour Party just completely gave up on this section of the community, and they went straight for, which Tony Blair as a government have admitted, bringing in loyal voters, which were immigrants, which have now become Muslims. Mm-hmm. There's one speech where anyone can watch it. His name's Shahid Malik. And he was a Labour MP for Dewsbury. And in his speech, he clearly tells us that in 2001, we had one Muslim MP. In 2004, we had three Muslim MPs. In 2008, we had 8 Muslim MPs. And in between saying each thing, he says, inshallah, inshallah, inshallah. And he says, within 15 years in this country, the majority of MPs will be Muslim. And then all the crowd, which is 1,000 Muslims, all cheer and clap. And then he says, within 30 years, the Prime Minister of this nation will share our faith. Yeah. Now, I say, don't listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. There's plenty of Muslims telling, and when he says this as a representative of the Labour Party, this is the problem. When you mix religion with politics, which is now happening, it goes like this now, actually. We have the Labour Party, which is the leading left-wing organisation. When they have their meetings in Muslim predominantly cities, they segregate the audiences. They segregate the audiences, men and women, in line with Sharia.
Yeah.
This is a party that's supposed to stand up for women, that's supposed to stand up for gay people's rights. And that's why I have utter contempt and disgust for what the Labour Party and the left have now become. But that doesn't mean all left-wing people, because Islam is something that should concern, and especially the literal interpretations of it, should concern everybody on the left. And every liberal should be screaming from the rooftops of what's happening.
I know. Believe me, I wish they were. So just as long as we're going on the political side of this, you were part of the British National Party for a while, I think about 10 years ago, and you left because you thought they were going too far right. You thought they were becoming racist, and that caused you to leave, correct?
No. So what happened was that was when I spoke about the Beslam school massacre, which when I was 21, I started looking online to find who's talking about these things. And there was only one group talking about them. They were called the British National Party. I joined the British National Party on the 12-month. They had a meeting. So I went along to the meeting and I joined in that meeting in my hometown. Mm-hmm. They then set up a second meeting where we were going to bring our friends. When I turned up with my friends to the second meeting, they said, he can't come in. He can't come in. It was the black lads. Which these black lads are English lads, yeah? They're my best friends. So they said they can't come in. So I said, what do you mean they can't come in? And they said, non-white people can't join the British National Party. Now, I was 21 years old, never involved in politics, never had an interest in politics. I didn't realise then that the leader of this organisation, his name was Nick Griffin, I didn't realise he was a Holocaust denier. I didn't realise that he used to be leader of a National Front, a Nazi organisation. And so from that, which there was a leaked membership list, which is how people know I was a member. But I didn't rejoin the next 3 years. That was my flirtation with the British National Party was done. I then, in 2009, like 5 years later, I set up the English Defence League. I set that up based on my own principles, which were anyone can join. We actually went on to have a Sikh division, a lesbian and gay division, a Jewish division, anyone that's affected by these problems, because I've grown up in a town where I don't care about other cultures. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're straight. None of that bothers me. Mm-hmm. Yeah? My problem is with this radical ideology, which is going to cause us all serious problems. But I then did leave the English Defence League as well. Yes, I left in 2013. I left because I found that a lot of my time, the majority of my time actually, was not spent trying to tackle the issues. It was spent trying to keep backward, inbred, far-right Nazis out of the movement.
Right, so that's a really interesting point, and I think it sort of illuminates your story a lot. So to be clear, you left one party because they didn't want black people, basically, in their party. And then when you started the EDL, where you had plenty of people from all walks of life joining you, you ended up leaving that too because it went too far right. So when people paint you as this ultra-right nationalist, whether they agree with all the other stuff you're saying or not, it just isn't true from any estimation that I can see.
Anyone can spend 5 minutes on Google. You can go to these ultra-right-wing Nazi nationalist organisations and see what they think of me. I get just as many death threats from them. I'm known as the real far right. See, what happens is I get called far right, but I'm not. The real far right in the UK, I'm a Zionist stooge. That's what I'm known as from the real far right.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
So real quick, though, on when you left the EDL, that was facilitated by Quilliam, which is Maajid Nawaz's organization that's trying to foster coexistence. I've had Maajid on. I hugely admire him. Can you just real quick explain how he helped facilitate you getting out?
I was leaving the organisation anyway. So I was leaving. I'd made the decision I was leaving. I then met Maajid Nawaz. I'd known of their organisation and some of the work they'd done anyway. If I'm honest, it benefited me and it benefited him at that time, and that's just me being completely honest. I then spent some time with Quilliam, who are seen as reformist Muslims. What I realised then was that many of them are if they're honest, are apostates. They don't follow the teachings of Islam. which is why they're able to say what they do. But then because of that...
So they're softening the blow, so to speak. They're not coming out right and saying, we don't believe in this. They're saying we're trying to reform it just because that's a little more palatable, sort of.
Yeah, but then they're targeted. They're actually hated more than me.
I see that.
They're actually hated more than me by Muslims. And then the more time I spent, look, I met Majid, Osama Hassan. Osama Hassan, I'd still say, is one of the most sincere and decent men I've met in my life. But they're not being entirely honest with the public about where we're at. I done some training in there, and I was taught that when we talk about Islamists, so the acceptable word now is that we're against Islamists, we're against Islamism, yeah. Then what they said is Islamist ideology, and they wrote a graph and drew this chart, and it was punishment for adultery, punishment for homosexuality, all the backward ideas that come out of it. But and they said that 90% of mosques in the UK are propagating this. Not 90% of the Muslims in the mosque, yeah, but 90% of the mosque, because of who's funding and controlling them and the hierarchy and the teachers and the imams, 90% of whom can't speak English either. Then 90% of the mosques are propagating Islamist ideology. And they had Islamist ideology under false Islam, and then they had true Islam, which they said 10% were. But I said, I have a huge problem with this, because if 90% are propagating this in the UK, that's true Islam. I get what you're trying to do, and I wish you every success in trying to change this. But we've had 1,400 years of history that shows it hasn't changed. You're fighting a battle now where, and I asked them when the last time I saw Osama Hassan, I said, how many people have you converted to your liberal form of Islam this week? Because whilst you've been doing that, radical extremists in prisons across this country and dawah stalls across this country have probably converted thousands.
Yeah, and I want to get to the prison part in a little bit, because you've had some completely insane experiences in prison. But just to wrap this part up, the interesting piece here is that although you're not working with Majid now, you guys, in your own way, you're both apostates to your community. He's considered, I see all the horrible things that people call him, porch monkey and terrible things coming out of the Muslim community saying about him, and coming from white people on the left, which they'd be considered racist if they said it about a black person, of course. But in a way, you both are now sort of outcasts, and that kind of brings you together, which to me, that's where the real conversation is, whether you work with him or Quilliam ever again. That's the lane that this has to go down.
The conversation's there, but this isn't a time for conversation. It's like, if we could rely on Muslims to solve this problem, I'm at the opinion now we can't, unfortunately. I think I spent 2 years floating there with different groups and talking to every moderate Muslim I'm introduced to. Just tomorrow night in the UK, there's a BBC Radio 4 programme, and I went last week because I travelled around meeting Muslim leaders again. And when I met a counter-extremism, counter-terrorism, hailed as the most moderate of Muslims you can get, when I sat down with him, I said, will you please condemn punishment for apostasy in the Islamic states? Whether that be in Saudi Arabia, just anywhere in the world, please condemn it. He wouldn't do it. I said, you can't even condemn that someone has the freedom to think. You can't even do that. He goes, well, we're not there. I said, that's not hard. It's not difficult. Either you want people to be punished for thinking a different way or you don't. And this is another Muslim that's hailed as the most moderate. And to be honest, I can't say I've met one other than Majid Nawaz, other than some of the Muslims in Quilliam. Other than that, all the Muslims that I've met, and I've pushed them on questions, I found out that once I've scratched underneath the surface, actually, they hold some quite abhorrent views. They do. Yeah. And if it was time if Muslims could solve this problem, then the combined military force surrounding 50 to 100,000 ISIS soldiers or ISIS militants is up to 5 million Muslims, combined military force, and they've done nothing, and they're not going to. So. Yeah. We have to do things now. We have to enforce laws. We have to push agendas that are going to make sure that we're secure and to make sure that we are not just secure but stable in the future. And we can't rely on Muslims to do it.
Okay, so you bring up some of what's going on with the prison system in the UK. You've been to prison a couple times. Actually, I think about 2 weeks ago, you might have been in prison for a day or something. Is that right?
I was arrested. I've been arrested and charged again, yes.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too much into the things that you've been arrested for. Some of them sound like extremely trumped up charges. This is a lot of what your book is about. But can you talk a little bit about what your experience was like in prison and how powerful the ideas of Islamism are actually spreading in the prison system?
So from the first time I went to custody in 2004, 2005, things have moved forward very quickly within the prison system. To when the next time that I went back into prison was 2010 for actually illegally entering America. But that was 2010. And what I've witnessed each time I've been in custody would terrify anyone. And I honestly say that if you could see the maximum security prisons with the most dangerous prisoners and most dangerous men in the UK are being used as ISIS training camps. They're ISIS training camps. The white lads, the black lads, everyone is converting. Everyone has a big, huge beard. It is the biggest gang in the system, and it's something that the authorities have not got a grip of. They can't control. The imams, God bless them, some of them are trying. But they're seen as stooges too. So the imams, people are not taking their shahada and converting to Islam in the mosque on Friday. They're doing it on the wing. On the prisoners' wings, they run their own mosques.
Right. So this is going to sound sort of amateurish because I've never been to prison. But when you've been there, how is it that these ideas spread? Why is it that the prison system is allowing? Now I know this is in the United States too. There's all kinds of crazy religious stuff that goes on in prisons and drug deals and it's all nuts. But what is going on that they're even allowing these ideas to spread?
They can't stop them. Islam forms a brotherhood straight away. A brotherhood. You mess with one Muslim, you mess with every Muslim. So in some instances, Islam is being used within the prison system, used for power, control, money. It's something that anyone can attach themselves to, and that's what's happened. But it's also been orchestrated and organised too. You see in British prisons where if a Muslim gets a non-Muslim to convert, outside sources are sending them in money. Yeah. So, and also, if you know the ideology of Islam, it's the pathway to heaven for them. It's the pathway to heaven is to spread Islam, to spread dawah, and to convert prisoners. But what you're seeing then is some of the most dangerous and extreme people in the UK are converting to Islam. And it also gives, when I say it's powerful, look, in the UK, we've lost our identity. Through political correctness and through years and years of being beaten down, English people have lost their community. We don't have the community feeling that Muslim community have. And when you've lost your identity and you're taught time and time again, or you're told time and time again that your identity and your culture and your history is not good, and then comes along this powerful community that will stick together, and you'll never be on your own, and it gives them everything they've been searching for. You have to remember a lot of people who are in the prison system have been wronged their whole life from a very young age. They've done a lot of wrong as well, but there's a reason many of them have chose that path. They've started with nothing, they've had nothing, and they've got nothing. Islam gives them a cause. It gives them something to fight for. It gives them something to concentrate on. And I can look. I've seen a lot in my life, but what I saw happening in the prison system, I don't know how we're going to deal with it. Well, I do know steps we can take. If you look at the statistics in French prisons, out of a population of I believe 7% Muslim, 70% of the prisoners are Muslim. In the UK, I spoke to prison officers who said that in 1 week they had 60 conversions because a Muslim gang had come into the prison and just started beating and attacking everybody to convert. And then before you know it, everyone just converts for the easy time, because if you're in trouble and you want protection, you convert.
So when you were in jail, speaking of being beaten, you were beaten basically to a pulp, right? I mean, all your teeth knocked out and really some horrible stuff, but you never converted. So how did you even, or I guess just talk about the violence that you were subjected to first.
So I was, in the UK prison system, they have laws and rules that they have to follow. They have a duty of care for every prisoner. Now, what they did went against every single rule. So I'm under no doubt. In fact, if I talk, when I was taken to Wood Hill is a maximum security prison in the UK that houses some of the country's most feared and dangerous terrorists. I was in prison for a financial irregularity on a form. Yeah, for that offence, you go to an open prison where you go home. Yeah, I was taken to a maximum security Category A prison. I was put in my cell, and the very first day when my door first opened, it was an ex-Royal Marine commando who's in the British military, and he said, when they come to get you from this cell, do not leave this cell. And I went, what? He goes, your life depends on it. Don't leave this cell. And then 10 minutes later, he's come with 2 other prison officers and said, come on, you're going to B-Wing. Obviously, I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving this cell.
Yeah.
Now, because I didn't leave the cell, I then get arrested. So I get a further charge. But I'm arrested, and then I go to see my solicitor the next day, and I have a meeting with my solicitor about what's happening. When they take me back after the meeting, they open up a waiting room, and as soon as I look in the waiting room, I see the huge beard of a white convert. I'm put into the room with about 8 people in it, and I'm violently attacked. And the door's locked. The door was locked by the prison officers. The door was locked, and I'm left to be violently beaten. And then not just that, but I was arrested again for fighting. They said, but that's just one experience in the prison system. To be honest, I'm lucky, and I believe that people were pulling strings in order to have me killed. And I think even that they are scratching their heads to how I walked out. And that's just one experience. That's happened time and time. You said I spent a day the other week in custody again.
Yeah.
This was quite recent, just probably 6 months ago. I was coming to the end of my license period with the authorities, where they have you on a control order. I wasn't allowed to contact people who were in the organisation I used to, and this was for a so-called mortgage fraud. Yeah, anyone who reads anyone who reads the story of what happened will see what it was all about. But I was I was taken for my last 8 days. So the last 8 days I was put back in prison. I was taken to a prison called Peterborough, where I said at the start, as soon as I got there, I said, I've got 8 days left. 8 days. I'm going to get killed. Yeah, just put me in isolation. I don't care if you don't open the door for 8 days. Mm-hmm. And in 8 days, let me go home. I've come out of my cell, and I've told the prison officer again. I said, look, we know what's going to happen here. And they've said, we'll have a word. And then a prisoner has come up to me, an English prisoner, and he put his hand over his mouth. He said, you're going to get done with boiling water. Now, in prison, they put boiling water with sugar, and it will take your face off. Mm. So I'm looking. I've got 2 minutes to think. I said, who's going to do it? And he said, the lad behind the door has put the money up because he'd paid money to have me hurt. Now, the lad standing next to the door was doing 28 years in prison for a murder, where they cut a man's nose off, they cut his ears off, and they killed him. Now, there was 4 of them in for that murder. I'm in for 8 days. I am known as someone who I've had Al-Shabaab have named me to be killed. I've had 6 government Osman warnings saying that there's intelligence I'm going to be murdered by Muslims. And here I am doing 8 days housed with Muslim murderers. Sorry. And then, so my mind's going quick. I already know that I've asked the prison authorities to segregate me, so there's no luck there. I look across and I do what I had to do. And I before he has a chance to turn around with his cup, I strike him. And then the prison, all the screws, the prison officers come and jump in. Now, I went before the prison governor for that offence, where I explained myself. I said, look, you put me in this position where I have to defend myself. They decided to take no further action. I was released from prison. I then went on a holiday with my wife and children. I landed back at home at Luton Airport at midnight, and the police were waiting for me. They arrested me in front of my kids, and they arrested me for attacking the Somalian prisoner who was going to do me with boiling water. They then made a decision in October last year of no further action. So they said, we're not taking any further action. I then recently, just 2 weeks ago, I launched Pegida UK, which is a new organisation to have street demonstrations. And 2 days later, they come and rearrested me for the offence that they'd already dropped.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of what your book is about, and it's sort of this endless cycle that you've been part of. And I know we could talk about the prison stuff forever because you're just scratching the surface of it. But let's talk about Pegida a little bit. So I think you just got back from Germany. You were doing something with them in Germany. Is that right?
I just got back last night. So I went to Copenhagen first, where I brought British journalists with us. So we went to Copenhagen to sort of launch Pegida in Denmark, and to ask the people to stand with us on the 6th of February. Because on the 6th of February, we're planning demonstrations in 14 countries now. This is the first time a coalition like this has been formed, and it's only been made possible by the commitment and the people of Dresden and their leadership of Lutz Bachmann and the others in Dresden. Because for the last year, every single Monday for 52 weeks, they have taken to the streets in their tens of thousands of times. The demonstration I just went to this Monday, there was well over 10 to 15,000 people there, in a completely peaceful and civilised manner, to express their concern through passive resistance of what's happening.
So, just to be clear, when this mass attack happened in Cologne just a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the year, it seemed like the police were not there. People did not know who to turn to. Women were being raped and attacked and all of that stuff. And then there were some demonstrations a couple days later, I think in Cologne and some other cities, and suddenly there were a lot of police to police the people that were there to protest the violence that happened to the women. So
Yeah,
there's something really backwards here.
I was there at that demonstration. I know exactly what it is. When you get large disturbances of Muslims, the police do stay away. Because if they go in with their batons, if they go in and try and police the streets, they'll provoke a riot, and that riot will spread, and they know that. So that we've seen that many times. When we hang up here, I can send you video after video, which actually shows the police running away in the UK. Now they don't run away from us. They'd knock your teeth out and knock your head off before they run away. When it comes, they're told to police the communities differently. Now, on New Year's Eve, the head of the police actually asked his superiors, he asked for an extra 100 police officers. He was refused. Yeah. And then what we saw was these mass attacks and these mass rapes of German women. And you're right, they had no one to turn to. And I travelled out there for the next demonstration, and lo and behold, you've got thousands of police officers, you've got water cannons, and German people were attacked with water cannons by the police.
So is the situation in Germany particularly precarious, even though you mostly focus in the UK because that's where you're from? I've heard a lot of people say that in Germany, because of the guilt related to the Holocaust, that they feel as a nation a certain amount of guilt. So when these migrants and all these people want to come there, they feel an extra need to help them. And because of that, that's why Merkel let in the, whatever it is, I think it's 1.2 million people. And that even when they do violent acts, as a society, they're more condoning of it because they know that their ancestors have done some pretty horrible stuff.
Well, this generation of Germans seem to be living with and suffering from guilt from Hitler. Yeah. The next generation of Germans will suffer and live with guilt from Angela Merkel. So that's what they need to wake up to. This generation have nothing to feel guilty about. They have a beautiful country, a beautiful culture, the envy of the world. They're beautiful people, beautiful people, such civilized and decent people, and they have nothing to feel guilty of. So what this is an underestimation of the culture and ideology they're allowing in. That's what it is. Like everyone's automatic humanity response is we must help these people, but not help them if it involves the destruction of your culture and your country. Not help them at the cost or the expense of young German girls. And I'm all for helping refugees. I just don't think they should be helped in Europe. I think they should be helped in the Middle East. I think that we should be leading the way in funding and military support to make sure that there are buffer zones. But I don't think that importing, and to be honest, by importing 1.2 million, is she making any impact on the suffering of refugees across the Middle East? Because there's tens of millions. Yeah. And what other option is there? Bring the whole of Syria into Europe? It solves nothing. It solves nothing. And what she's actually done by doing this is she's opened up the floodgates, and we'll now see absolute stampedes of tens of millions over the next 5 years.
Well, I've also read a bunch on how it's not just about the violence, but also just the actual system, the systems that are in place, the social systems. You know, I was reading something this morning about how all of these people that are coming from Syria, a huge percentage of them have really bad teeth. Their teeth are really bad. Now they're going to get free dental coverage, and it's going to cost something, it was something like €1 billion or something, but they're not going to pay for it, so the average German taxpayer is going to have to pay for it. And then that right there, when their taxes go up, then naturally they're going to be more resentful of these people. So it's hitting people at the economic level and at the violent level. It just seems like a terrible mix for a society.
It's going to hit them everywhere. I believe 80% of them can't read or write. I believe that many of the real refugees that have come from Syria are going to be suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're going to need counselling. They're going to need help. There's so many problems that will come from this. And we say 1.2 million, but they're allowed to bring their families after 3 years, right? And they're allowed their EU passports. So that 1.2 will become 6 or 8. It doesn't have the infrastructure. Simply, but what Angela Merkel's fully aware of is that they won't stay in Germany. They're going to come to countries like mine. Yeah. And she knows it. She knows. And in fact, just last week, the German government have come out and said, we've lost 600,000 refugees. We've lost them, asylum seekers. We've lost them. They're not where they said they were. They've gone. That. Now, 600,000. How many of them are rapists? How many are ISIS fighters? How many are criminals? We have no idea. No idea at all.
So let me ask you this, because a lot of this, at some level, you hear the people throwing around the term Trojan horse a lot. And a lot of it sort of sounds like a conspiracy, that there has been this organized effort to just influx all these people. And I think I've seen even in some of the videos that you've tweeted, when you see just like hundreds or thousands of migrants crossing, it does seem like it's 80 or 90% men that are 20 or 30. You don't see a lot of women. You see, occasionally you'll see some women and some children, but it does seem like a lot of men. But to go that route, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. To go and say, oh, there's an intentional plan to flood Europe with these people to ultimately take over. But I suspect by the 50 minutes we've spent together, you don't think it's much of a conspiracy.
There can be no other reason. Anyone with any common sense and intelligence or brain can look at what's happening and know it's not going to be good for Europe. Anyone can look at what's happening. Angela Merkel made comments such as immigrants are more prone to violence and extremism than non-immigrants. She said that years ago. She's also made comments saying that multiculturalism has failed. They've already failed to integrate millions of Muslims. Yeah. So why is she bringing millions more? What reason? If anyone else can give a reason, and how are these millions?
Well, what do you think? What do you think actually? What do you think is going on in her head then? If everything you've said here is true, Angela Merkel, she was just Time Woman of the Year, right? I mean, this is a bright lady, right? So
Angela Merkel has no children. Angela Merkel has no children, and she cares not for the future of her country or her people. That's truthfully what I feel. I don't think she cares about the future of her people. And at the same time, you have this. As you said, people holding her up on a pedestal. At first, whether it was through I can't say it was through ill intention, because I think they know. Everyone knows full well what this is going to do to Europe. We know full well what's going to happen. And what you're seeing is that actually the only countries in Europe that are freely speaking honestly are the countries that don't have a rather high percentage of Muslims. It's Poland, it's Hungary, it's Czech Republic, it's Slovakia. Their political leaders are coming out and saying what needs to be said. Now, if you look at the UK's former political leaders, if you look at Sir William Gladstone, he held the Quran above his head. He's in Parliament, and he said that Islam, this Quran is a violent and accursed book, and we will never have peace on this earth so long as we have this book. Winston Churchill said that individual Muslims will show amazing characteristics, but the backwardness of Islam has the power to bring Europe back to the Dark Ages. Now, they're two world leaders that we have statues of, that the whole world loved. And if they were around today, they would be called bigots and extremists. And that's simply for telling the truth. My Prime Minister says that Islam is a religion of peace. And the facts speak very different to that. And at the moment, the problem we have is that by telling the truth, which even if people don't like the truth, we have to be honest.
I also think when people say Islam is a religion of peace, or Christianity is a religion of peace, or Judaism is a religion of peace, it's a moot point. Because a religion is only a set of ideas, all a religion is what its adherents do, right? It's a religion of peace, that means nothing. That an idea is what people do with it. So I find those statements like that just don't add anything to the conversation.
No, and we hear them after every terrorist attack. Every single terrorist attack. That's all we're told. And in fact, it's not all we're told. I'll give you two other circumstances now as a parent, as a dad. I was studying the biography of Muhammad, and I'm sat at home and I'm preparing for a debate. And my daughter, who is 8 years old, she walked past me and said, because I never taught my children a thing. My kids never heard of the English Defence League. I live two very separate lives, and I want to protect them for as long as possible from understanding these politics. Mm-hmm. My daughter walked past and said, "Muhammad, peace be upon him." And I looked at her and I said, "What did you just say? And why did you just say that?" And she said, "Well, I was taught at school you have to say peace be upon him." I said, "Peace be upon him." So that's just one incident. Then another incident about a mosque. And then when I took my children to look at another school, one of the things they had to do was put the different religious buildings with the different religious words. The only one my daughter could do, the religions of the world, was Islam, because what's happening now in the national curriculum in the UK is that Islam is the favoured religion. Islam is what's being pushed and propagated to all of our youth and children, and they're brainwashing. I don't mind if they want to talk about Muhammad. Tell the truth.
Yeah.
Tell the truth about the man. Right? He was not a man of peace. Some of the things he done was such immoral things.
No, he killed a lot of people. There's no,
He killed a lot of people.
that's a fact.
It's a fact. But they're not teaching that. They're teaching that this is this great man, Muhammad, that we must all respect and say peace be upon him. That's what they're teaching 8-year-old English children. So then by the time that next generation come out of the schools, they've been brainwashed into this mindset. And as soon as your parents even, I've seen it across the country, parents who have not wanted their children to be taught these things are then branded as racist as well. I'm all for the truth being taught to my kids. But then I'm then haven't even spoke to my children. If I haven't spoke to my children about Islam, I don't want school talking to them about it.
Well, that's one of the strange things, and I think we see this a little bit in America, where they'll say, well, we need to learn more about Islam because of this. And to me, it's like, we should not be learning more about Islam. We should not be learning more about Christianity. We should not be learning more about Judaism or Mormonism or Jainism or any of them. What we should be learning about are secular values. We should be learning about the things that tie us together, not all the little differences that are just going to split us.
I'm completely in agreement. It's just that the fundamental problem, I always say that I believe in secular schools. I think we should have secular schools. But then I don't believe we should also, I don't believe that should pose a problem for Sikh schools or
Sure.
Hindu schools or Christian schools because they're not causing us the problems that we face. These huge problems that we face currently are caused by Islam. They're inspired by Islam. And if they want to sit in schools and talk about Muhammad, they need to tell them that he raped a child, he married a child, he committed murder. They need to tell the truth. And they're not. So then we have this complete watered down educational system that is lying to the next generation of youth in the UK.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to wrap up. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. And hopefully with the way I prefaced this whole episode, people will learn about you and they can make the decisions, you know, whether they think you're racist or whether they think you're preaching the truth or somewhere in between. But just to wrap up, give me something that you think, give me some hope here. Give me some hope. I mean, you're working with Pegida now. It doesn't sound like a hate organization to me. So give me some hope for an ability to turn some of this around and for some coexistence.
Europe is waking up. Hugely, the people of Europe. You've just seen a declaration called the Fortress Europe, which is it's called the Prague Declaration, which 14 different countries now have assigned to. On the 6th of February, for the first time, there's going to be demonstrations in England, in Holland, in Denmark, in Germany, in the Czech Republic, in Poland, all simultaneously at the same time. This is the start of a friendship and partnerships being built across Europe. Not just Europe, actually. Australia are also marching with us. We hope that by the next time we have America, we hope we have Canada, we hope we have India, we hope we have the world, because this is a worldwide problem we have to face. And yeah, there is hope, and there'll always be hope, because to be honest, I know wholeheartedly that our love for freedom and our love for democracy will always outweigh their hatred and want for Sharia.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, it was really interesting talking to you, and I'm sure we'll keep talking. But I was going to send people to Amazon to buy your book, but Amazon took your book off, didn't they?
They've took it off and put it back up 3 times.
Right. So I'm not sure if it's up right now, but they can definitely get your book at tommyrobinson.co.uk, and they can get the Kindle version at least.
Kindle in America, yeah.
On Amazon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. And, you know, it's difficult stuff, but that's why we have to have these conversations. So I thank you for coming on.